I would like to request Dr. V. Mohan to present his findings with us, and we eagerly await a lot of excitement in his speech. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. When I got invited for this meeting, I didn't realize how much about milk I will learn. And from the morning, I've been learning so much, particularly from those reels. It's actually made my job easier because I don't have to talk about all those things which the students have talked about. So, Dr. Prajapati, thank you very much for inviting me. We have been working together for So we've been working together for many years now, and I hope that we'll continue to do research in this field, because I think a lot of research needs to be done. Dr. Sodhi, it was inspiration to talk, to listen to you, both informally as well as formally, and you're a storehouse of knowledge. In fact, I've been taking notes of all that you spoke, but I still need more information about the sweets and all the other statistics that you said, because I think it'll be useful in my specialty also, the kind of information that you've given us. Dr. Manesha, I was really impressed by the science that he brought into his talk, and I agree about the intervention effect. Whenever the government takes up new projects, for example, I'm involved with the Satya Sai organization, where we have started a new program with the Andhra government, where they've been giving free lunches up to now, but we are now giving free breakfast to almost more than 4 lakh children in Andhra Pradesh. Almost all the government schools in Andhra Pradesh, 48,000 schools or something like that. And so the one thing I was saying is get data. What was it before and what was it after? You've already given the lunch. Now we're giving the breakfast, and what happens? We don't measure it. It'll just become one more, okay, we gave to children. It's very important to document that, because everything has a science behind it. And very glad that Dr. Manesha brought that out. And Dr. J.V. Parekh, it's been a pleasure to be with you. Dr. Jagmeet Madan, very glad that you're here. We've interacted in many forums together. Find many other friends like senior dietitians, nutritionists, and Cheryl Salis I saw, and many others who are here. And of course, the doyens in the field of dairy. Since we have been doing some work on dairy, it's a great pleasure to meet the people who are actually looking after dairy. I think dairy is very important, and I don't know, for some reason the last few years it's been getting a bad name, which it should not at all. And I hope to convince you, at least as far as my specialty is concerned. And of course, to all the students, young students here, do more research, bring in a lot of science. You're all working in great institutions. And the more science we bring into this, the more acceptability it will have. So on that note, what happened to my slides? So I'm going to just stick to the role of dairy and milk products in the field of diabetes and metabolic diseases, because I think it's too vast a subject to talk about the whole of health, and a lot has been spoken from this morning about common things which we know about milk being a wholesome food and so on. So I'll talk one slide on role of milk in mythology just to set the trend, and then go straight about, go to the association of milk with diabetes and metabolic syndrome, which is what I'm going to talk about, and a few other research studies which we have done, and then I'll conclude. So we know that right from in Hindu mythology, you cannot separate out milk. And we know about goddess Kamadhenu, the wish-granting divine cow, whom Hindus consider cows to be sacred. We know that. I don't have to tell this audience about that. And of course, Lord Krishna cannot be separated from milk, right from his childhood, his love for butter, and it's called as a makhan chor, or the butter thief, and so on. If milk was really that bad, it could not have. My simple approach to this is that if something has been really harmful to humanity, it would not have survived 5,000, 10,000 years. the very fact that humanity has accepted milk all these years, suddenly in the last 10 years, milk cannot become bad. So common sense itself tells us that there's more good than bad as far as these products which have stood the test of time, if we can put it that way. So about milk and health, I think a lot has been spoken, so I'm not going to repeat this here, but it's calcium and riboflavin, phosphorus, vitamin D, pantothenic acid, potassium, vitamin A, niacin. All these are essential nutrients. And milk, as we repeatedly say, and it's cliched now, that it's a wholesome product or a wholesome food. There are very few foods, we look at it that way, which are truly wholesome. And I think milk represents that. The very fact that a child for the first 6 months needs only that, only breast milk and nothing else itself, and then still the child is growing, itself is testament to that. Bone health and heart health and blood pressure, because once you have potassium, it's, potassium reduces the blood pressure, so it has to be good for blood pressure. And considering that 1 in 3 Indians, our latest INDIAB study shows that there are 350 million people with hypertension today in India. So for them, if this one thing, banana and milk, if you remember 2 things which have a lot of potassium, obviously they're going to be good for people with hypertension. Now, this particular myth, I'm not sure how it really started, but I think it's from here. It's from the western part of India. We don't hear much of this in South India, milk being bad, milk being bad. But whenever I go to social media, I find it's people from Maharashtra and Gujarat and so on, the very place where milk is being produced, who are talking bad about milk. And I can't understand why there is so much of hatred. Of course, it is also mixed with the veganism. So the vegan movement is very strong, as we know, and anything to do with animals is bad. So we are, in fact, animals, let me tell you, on a lighter vein, it's more difficult to get an animal ethics committee permission than a human ethics committee permission. If you want to do any experiment in humans, you'll get it. The human ethics committee will give it to you easily. But try to get an animal ethics committee. We had actually we did have some animals in our lab. And so we had this animal ethics committee, and I'll tell you the story. So we were just about to start the meeting, we'd served tea, and suddenly there was a dog barking in the next house, next to our hospital, and it was barking. And this lady who was, part of this committee, she said, "Why is that dog barking?" I said, "I don't know why the dog is barking. It's not my dog, first of all. Somebody else's dog." "No, but we can't continue this meeting until we find out why the dog is barking. There's something upsetting that dog." I said, "The owner of the dog will look after that, Let's continue with our meeting." She said, "No, it's my duty. I have to go and see." So I said, if a human being is crying like that, will anybody even stop and look at it? So many people are being murdered, raped on the road, and nobody even bothers. But a dog, barks. There are people willing to go running for it. Well, I appreciate that. I have nothing against it. I don't think we should go to the other extreme of saying that human beings are not important, And so this movement, I'm myself a vegetarian, so I have nothing against vegetarianism or veganism and so on. But I think carrying it to an extent beyond science is where I draw the line. And I say, let's look at the science part of it. That's exactly what I'm going to see. Now, particularly with relation to diabetes and metabolic syndrome, I have heard time and again nutritionists, particularly from this part of the country, saying that the cause of diabetes is milk. And they say, you just stop milk and diabetes will disappear from India. I wish it was so easy. You can just ban milk, ban the dairy, and finished. We can close down all your Indian Dairy Association, diabetes will disappear from the face of India. I wish it was so simple. It's not at all that simple. And in fact, the other way around, I would go as far as to say that dairy is actually good for diabetes. And that's what I'm trying to show you now. Now, let's first look at the foreign evidence, even before we come to the Indian evidence. And, when you do 100 studies, anything in medicine, all the 100 studies won't say the same thing. There'll be variations. One will say it's good, one will say it's not bad, one may say it's bad. It all depends on how it is done, the sample size, the rigor of the study, the statistics employed, all these are taken into consideration. But if you have 10, 20, 30 studies and put them all together, it has to move in a particular direction. Okay? So that's what a systematic analysis is all about, a systematic review is all about, or a meta-analysis is all about. So here is one from China, I think this one is. And if you look at what they are saying, the conclusion is that a modest increase in dairy intake, daily intake of dairy products such as low-fat dairy, cheese and yogurt may contribute to the prevention of type 2 diabetes. And this is a systematic review and a dose-response meta-analysis. So even the dose they have looked at, okay? And that's what they're concluding. It's a large study. They've looked at many, many studies. All the studies which are there in MBASE and Scopus and so on have been. But then they say randomized control trials are needed. Of course, you need randomized control trials for that. The difficulty in doing randomized control trials also I can tell you. So if you want to really prove that milk protects against diabetes, you'll have to take large enough sample, let's say 10,000 people, 20,000 people, and give them a lot of milk for the next 10, 20 years. Okay? And another group you must have, another 10, 20,000 people, whom you say should not take even a drop of milk for the next 10, 20 years. So you can imagine how difficult it is to do such studies. So sometimes in science, you cannot produce the evidence. Do you know, all of you know that smoking is bad? All of you know that smoking is related to lung cancer? What if I tell you it's never been proven? How do you prove it? You'll have to get 10,000 people, make them smoke 50 cigarettes a day for the next 40 years, okay? And take another 50,000 people or 20,000 people, tell them you should not smoke. And for the next 20 years, follow these people up. And then see how many cancers develop here, how many cancers don't develop here. Is it possible even to do such a study? But we know through common sense that smoking is bad. We look at all the association studies, look at all. You don't need to do a randomized clinical trial to prove everything. You take potassium cyanide, you will die. Okay? So shall I give half this room potassium cyanide to see how many die? And then half this room I don't give potassium cyanide and see how many didn't die? You know? So, I mean, there are crazy things which you should not do in medicine. Now, here is that particular study, which I told you, the PLOS One 2013 study. Now, just to tell you how to read these graphs, because I'm going to show you these graphs again and again. I'm sure many of you, the scientists in the audience, will know. Okay? Now, look at that central point. Now, if any study or any intervention has no effect at all, it's neither good nor it's bad, then it will be on that line. See this study, for example, okay, is completely on that line, which means it's neither good nor it's bad. It's neutral. All right? Yeah, I can probably. Okay, so it's very important to know this. Now, if it moves that side, it means it is increasing the risk. And if it makes you more susceptible to whatever disease you're studying. If you put cancer there and you get something going there, it means your cancer is increasing. If it comes this side, that means it's protecting against cancer or diabetes or whatever. So remember that. The unity means that it is neutral. Now, it must be completely on this side without touching that if it is significant. If it is on this side and it's touching, it means yes, it is protective, but it's not significant. And if it's not significant, the study is not significant. There is a suggestion that it may be protective. So look at all the graphs which you're going to present, including our own studies I'm going to show you. This side is good, that side is bad. If it touches the middle, there is no significance. Now what do you do when one is on that side and one is on this side, but both are touching? That means both are not significant. This one is suggesting it is not good. This one is suggesting it is good. So you, at the end of it, you do an overall analysis. You put it all together, and then you calculate whether it is good or bad. So here is overall telling you that it's on this side. That means it is beneficial. And what are we studying? we are studying metabolic syndrome here, which means, for those of you who don't know what is metabolic syndrome consists of 5 metabolic diseases which are put together and is called as a syndrome. One is diabetes or high blood glucose. It need not even be diabetes, can be pre-diabetes. High blood pressure, number 2. Third is abdominal obesity. If you have a waist circumference which is increased. Number 4 is a low HDL cholesterol. Your good cholesterol is HDL. If it goes low, it's bad. And triglycerides being high. Your serum triglycerides, one of the fats, like cholesterol being high. If you have these 5, it's called metabolic syndrome. You don't have to have all the 5. If you have 2 or 3 of them itself, it's called metabolic syndrome. Okay? So this study is showing that it's actually beneficial. Now, that is a conclusion. A modest increase in daily intake of dairy products such as low-fat dairy, cheese, yogurt may contribute to the prevention of type 2 diabetes, but you need randomized clinical trials. Okay, sorry. Right, here is another one, and this is a study which has looked at I think it's the same? No, so this is from US, from San Francisco, and the conclusion of this study is that this dose-response meta-analysis of observational studies suggests a possible role for dairy products, particularly yogurt, in the prevention of type 2 diabetes. This is the second study. One is from China, one is from the United States. Okay, and they're not funded by dairy or anything. They're independent scientists who have done this. Okay, this is from Harvard actually. It's from the from Walt Willett's group and that group, Vasanthi Malik and Walt Willett's group. This is from Boston, from the Harvard School of Public Health, so the mecca of nutrition, as you know. Going too fast. Okay, here is another one which is done in 3 cohorts of US adults, dairy consumption and the risk of type 2 diabetes. The third study is again from Frank Hugh and Walt Willett and so on. And we have also Dr. Mozaffarian and all the big names whom all the nutritionists here know. And this article published in BMC Medicine says higher intake of yogurt is associated with a reduced risk of type 2 diabetes, whereas other dairy products and consumption of total dairy are not associated with the risk of diabetes. They're not saying it is associated. Some are neutral, some are protective. And this is something very similar to what we have found as well. Now you may say, okay, this is all other countries, they are using different dairy products. We are interested only in Indian dairy. Of course, we are. So what about the Indian data? Now, the first study how I got interested in this, I'll tell you. So one of the first epidemiological studies, as you may know, we now have several epidemiological studies which we are involved in. But the one which we took up in Chennai first, one of the largest which we have done, as you can see, this is study number 59th publication. We are now up to 160 papers from this one study. Okay, it's a representative study of the whole of Chennai. We have taken a complete representative sample, 26,000 people, whom initially we did a lot of descriptive studies. The first 140 papers came only from the cross-sectional ones. Then we started doing the follow-up studies. We went back to the same individuals 5 years later, 10 years later, 15 years later, and started looking at the same individuals. So we have what is called as cross-sectional data and what is called as the prospective or longitudinal data. And of course, cross-sectional data is weak because there are a lot of confounding which can take place in a cross-sectional study. For example, in a cross-sectional study, you go and look at the whole population. Suppose the whole population here I'm studying now, and I say, okay, in this population, okay, of all of you who consume milk, your cholesterol is very low, so I'm very good. All those who taken milk and cholesterol is bad would have died. I'm just arguing. You're not in this room because you're not even alive. So this cross-sectional study will give me some information, but it may not be the full information. If I really want to know, I must take this baseline survey now, follow all of you all for the next 20 years, which is possible, by the way. We have done it. We'll show you. And then see how many of you developed diabetes, how many of you developed heart disease, and how many of you took dairy in its various forms, how much dairy you took, and then correlated. That becomes a longitudinal study. Very, very powerful. Next to doing a randomized clinical trial, that is the most powerful. And we have data for both. So when we first did this study, Our aim was not milk at all, it was not dairy at all. I was more interested in the carbohydrate. Because I had a hypothesis that eating too much of rice in Chennai is the cause, or wheat in the north or west of India is the cause. So what we found was that if you look at refined grain, which is rice, strongest association with type 2 diabetes in our population. Very, very strong. Okay? Now in that particular study, that is dairy in blue, we found it's protective. So if the number, remember, if the number is more than 1, it is association, less than 1, it's protective. So for refined grain, it was 5.3, 5 times higher risk of people who consume more of rice in the 4th quartile. If you take the whole population, divide them into least, next, highest. Those who are in the highest consumption of rice have such a great increased risk, 5 times higher than those who are there. And this has been corrected for obesity and physical activity, family history, everything. So directly rice seems to be showing that. In this study, we were surprised to find dairy going the other way. Dairy had 0.54. In fact, it was the most protective of all. So when we wrote this paper in British Journal of Nutrition, I said, why is dairy showing this? You know, we had no, at that time there was no social media thing saying it is higher, low. This is something strange. So we wrote in the discussion, strangely we are seeing dairy being protective. And we try to think, why can it be protective? Is it the calcium? Is it the vitamin D? Is it the protein? Or is there something else protective in milk which needs to be investigated? But we concluded that dairy definitely, and that's the amount of dairy consumed, if you want to know how much they actually consumed. But there's only one city, okay? So we found this overall protective effect of dairy, and the dairy which is consumed was a full-fat dairy only. It is not skimmed milk and low-fat dairy. So even the 3 to 4% fat milk was found to be protective. And of course, we came up with various theories, but we had no idea why it was protective. I wasn't even sure if there's some confounding effect. Those who ate dairy, maybe they are exercising more, maybe they are following healthier diet, maybe they were thinner, maybe they were, so many things possible. Okay, but that's what we found. Okay. Now we have to do a prospective study. Luckily for us, we are involved in a large prospective study, the largest, in fact, called as PURE. PURE is Prospective Urban Rural Epidemiological Study. Now, where did PURE start? It started in India. It started in St. John's. It's run by Dr. Salim Yusuf. Many of you would have heard this great name, like Frank Yu and so on, but he's not a nutritionist, he's a cardiologist. He works in Hamilton in Canada. So he started in St. John's, and then he said, why should it be only Bangalore? Why not make it whole India? He's like that. He keeps on thinking bigger, bigger, bigger. There's no limit for him. So then we immediately, Chennai joined, Trivandrum joined, Jaipur joined, and Chandigarh joined. So it became pan-India. Then he said, why only India? Why not bring in other countries? So China came in. Then why not Africa? Africa came in. Then Europe came in. Then Canada came in. So now it is a study which has 225,000 participants whom we are following. Every year we are following them with 500,000 information on all of them, 1,000 urban and rural communities in 27 countries. 27 countries, 5 continents. You can't get bigger than that. So anything which comes out from PURE will straight go into Lancet, New England Journal. There's no study like that. I mean, there's no, you'll have to start some, this has been going on for 20 years, by the way, okay? So, in India, of course, we started it, so India has 5 cities which are participating in that. So, the diabetes part of PURE, I am personally looking after that. So, we said, okay, let's look at, and Bhavadharini was my PhD student. I sent her, once she finished her PhD, I sent her to Salim Yusuf. She spent 2 years with him. And one of the things she looked at is dairy consumption with metabolic syndrome and with hypertension and diabetes, new onset. That means in this, when they started, they didn't have diabetes, and then later on, they developed. Look at the number of individuals, 147,000 people from 21 countries, not just India alone. from 21 countries. Okay? What did we find? What we found was, and this is just to give you how we studied it, dairy consumption. For each country, we had a validated FFQ which is developed. Then we looked at prevalent metabolic syndrome. That means that is cross-sectional. But we looked at incident diabetes. How many develop new onset diabetes? How many develop new onset hypertension? As I told you, prospective is much more important. And this is how we defined it. Total dairy was defined like this: whole fat dairy, low fat dairy, butter, cream, everything is included in this. And this is just to tell you, one serving of milk was less, one serving of yogurt was this, cheese, and so on. Incident hypertension is new onset hypertension, incident diabetes, new onset diabetes. Now look at the graphs. Okay? This is total dairy with metabolic syndrome. This is the amount consumed of dairy, total dairy. Graph is going like that for metabolic syndrome. Okay? This is blood pressure. It's going like that. Not going on the other side. Okay? Diabetes, total cholesterol going this way. So who told you that milk increases your cholesterol? Milk is actually decreasing your cholesterol. Okay? HDL cholesterol, no change. Okay? This is triglycerides going the right direction. And this is fasting glucose going the direction. So glucose it improved, triglyceride it improved, metabolic syndrome it improved, HDL was neutral, and total cholesterol went that way, blood pressure went that way. Okay? Now that is with whole fat dairy. This is total dairy and whole fat dairy. Same findings. So what we found in Pure is, it is not necessary even to have a low fat dairy. It doesn't seem to help. In the long run, it doesn't seem to help at all. Whatever you're taking, that's fine. Unless for a particular purpose, you have a heart problem and your cardiologist tells you, then you take that. It's not necessary for a population, everybody to start changing to low fat dairy. Not necessary. Okay? Now this is low fat dairy. In fact, low fat dairy we didn't find much benefit. But one of the reasons is that there's not enough people taking low fat dairy. If you take in many of the countries, it's not even available. So another thing I'll teach you, the longer the confidence intervals. Suppose this is short, that means the results are more reliable. The more it starts going like that, it means the results are not that reliable. The sample size is not enough. And for low fat dairy, we didn't have enough people, even out of 200,000 people, we didn't have enough people consuming low fat dairy on a regular basis. How many of you consume low fat dairy? Raise your hands. How many of you consume dairy, whole fat milk? Everybody here. So my findings are correct. Okay? I'm just checking whether my findings are correct or wrong. Okay, here is hypertension. This is new onset hypertension. Okay, the other one was prevalent hypertension. Here is new onset hypertension. It's actually benefiting hypertension. So there's less of hypertension. You have less blood pressure if you take dairy. And that's what I told you in the beginning about potassium. Now it's been proved in a study. Look at, and that was diabetes. On the other side was diabetes, incident diabetes, and you can see again it is protecting. So it's actually protecting. You remember the systematic review analysis which we did, we said it may prevent diabetes. Yes, we are proving it. At that time, Pure was not published. No, Pure is actually showing this. Okay? So our conclusion was higher intake of dairy was associated with the modestly lower prevalence of metabolic syndrome, and most of its components, there's 5 components only, including abdominal obesity, blood pressure, sugar, and so on, with a lower incidence of hypertension and diabetes during follow-up. I think Pure has proved that by taking dairy, and we looked at all the components of dairy, not one of them was detrimental. Some were neutral, and the others, like for example, butter was neutral. It didn't either benefit or it didn't show any bad thing. But it didn't show bad. It didn't show, oh, everybody ate butter, died, and so on. No, it didn't show it at all. Okay? So that was what was published in 2020. Right. Now, we wanted to study the glycemic index because we know we always talk about lactose being present, glucose is there, lactose is there, so milk will increase your sugar. So we did some studies. We looked at 3 fat 3% fat milk and curd, and we looked at the glycemic index. And you'll be very happy to note that is glucose and that is milk and curd. It's very low. The glycemic index is unpublished data. We're going to publish it now. It's very, very low. So again, a myth that if you take milk, your sugar will go up because your glycemic index is very low in dairy. Okay? Right. And this is Indian whole milk, our own milk that what you guys produce. Right. Now, milk and mortality. Now, forget about diabetes. Forget about hypertension. Forget about metabolic syndrome. What people die of, is that important? Okay? What do you ultimately die of? That's the ultimate proof, isn't it? We have it. In Pure, we have it because we have detailed studies on mortality. Each of that mortality is adjudicated by 3 people before we publish it, because they're cardiologist group. So they're very, very strong about adjudication of pure mortality. Okay? There's a separate training program how to do verbal autopsies and so on. So we looked at, this is Mashik Dengan, and group. She's just retired actually from Pure. But this was her Lancet paper, where we looked at mortality and dairy consumption after correcting for everything else. Those who consume dairy, do they live longer or do they die? Okay, simple question for you. I've got the papers, by the way. These 3 papers I've just given Dr. Prajapati now. The conclusion of that study, very detailed study, Lancet has published it, main Lancet. Okay? And the conclusion was dairy consumption was associated with a lower risk of mortality and major cardiovascular disease events in a diverse multinational cohort. We looked at it in Asians, we looked at it in Indians, we looked at it overall, we looked at it everywhere. Same result coming again and again and again and again. That if you take dairy, you live longer. Your mortality comes down. Very, very powerful data. Okay? Nobody has contested this even. After it's been published, nobody has even contested why like this or something. Nothing. Because it's a conclusive study. Right. So this is just the details of that, how we studied it, and how we studied total mortality, and we studied cardiovascular disease as well. You can see this is total dairy, and you can see it is beneficial. And that is CV death, non-CV death, everything is decreased. Nothing on the other side. Some are significant, some are not significant, but everything is going in the same direction. Major cardiovascular disease, totally significant. Mortality, significant. The mortality, it's not touching, see. So overall mortality, why overall mortality and cardiovascular? They may not get cardiovascular disease, they may die of cancer, isn't it? Here total mortality is also decreased. They're not dying from anything. They're actually living longer, okay? And this is for yogurt. Yogurt we find in almost every study as having the best benefit, even better than milk. And I'll show you our own systematic review just published, which I'll just show you. Okay, so this was association of dairy intake, and this is the conclusion, that dairy consumption associated with lower risk of mortality and major cardiovascular diseases in a diverse multinational cohort. Okay. This is our latest, just published about a month ago. This is a systematic review where we looked at milk and cultured milk products, a systematic, global systematic review and meta-analysis of all prospective studies only we did. No cross-section studies here. All the studies included this are incident studies, longitudinal follow-up studies. Every study done in the world we included. This is the first time that we have done this. This is published in the Journal of the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. Okay? And we wanted to look at the effect of milk and cultured milk products. This is just how many articles we went through and how many we included, and there were actually 27 studies which were relevant. Now, these are all the studies, and this is the consumption of total dairy and its effect on what? I don't know what the effect is on. Okay. So anyway, you can see that all the studies are on this side, and the randomized If you take 0.14, it means there's an 86% reduction. This particular table, I don't know from which, on what this is studying. Now, okay, I think this is with no, okay. This is on type 2 diabetes. The whole thing is on diabetes. The whole thing is milk and milk products, on cultured milk products. On type 2 diabetes, wanted to study, put a final thing to this, studying every prospective study which has been included in this. And so if you can see that almost all the studies are showing protection, where is one study, you tell me, which is showing increased risk? There's not one. I don't know where this myth comes from, how people are talking about it. Milk is a cause of diabetes. Tell me, where is it? Show me. I'd like to see the data. It's not there. Okay. Here again, if at all, this is fermented dairy. If at all, it's neutral, but you can see the overall effect is huge, hugely protective. Okay. And therefore, the conclusion of the study was that total and fermented dairy products, particularly plain yogurt, are protective again. We looked at everything in this. There is butter in this, there is milk in this, we have yogurt in this. Yogurt clearly protective against diabetes. Milk protective to some extent. Butter was neutral, didn't have any effect. While milk, cheese and other dairy products have a neutral or no effect. Milk was there, but it's not statistically significant. So we didn't. But not one of these showed on the other side. So it's either neutral or it is beneficial. Even if it is neutral, let me say, by taking milk, you want, of course, the other ways to protect diabetes. You have to run, you have to reduce your food, you have to reduce your rice intake. It's not just drink milk and protect diabetes. I'm not saying that. There are other ways to protect. Sleep well on time, reduce your stress. So many things you have to do. Okay. So let us say that at the end of the day, milk turned out to be neutral. So what? It has so many other benefits of health. We are not saying it's an anti-diabetic drug. We are saying it's only good for you, it's not bad for you. The whole aim was to see whether it produces diabetes. It doesn't. That much I can tell you, it definitely doesn't produce diabetes. And from this part of the country, I think, must remove that myth. And it's your duty to do that. Okay? Because people are going to get, deprived of a product which is so good for health. Are there any side effects with milk? Of course there is. There are people who are lactose intolerant. The moment they take milk or any dairy product, they start having diarrhea. We don't know the exact percentage. The literature is a bit confusing regarding that. It's probably worth doing that. It's not an easy study to do. But probably studies like Pure and all can even look at that. So those who are having clear lactose intolerance probably should not take it. Okay? Certain people have very rarely allergies, eczema. We've just mentioned how many types of peptides and so on are there. You can be allergic to some peptides, so then you should avoid it. Acne in teenagers has been shown. Prostate cancer, this is something I learned from Walt Willett and Frank Hugh. That if you take more than 3 glasses of milk, if a male takes more than 3 glasses of milk, your risk for prostate cancer goes up. So don't drink, as an adult, you don't need 3 glasses of milk. Don't take more than 1 glass. That's enough. 1 glass of milk gives you 500 milligrams of calcium, and that's enough. Even for pregnant women, that is enough. For a child, it is enough. So 1 glass of milk has never been shown to have any of these side effects. And of course, quite interestingly, while it should protect you from bone fractures, if you take too much of milk, actually bone fractures increase in women. So don't take too much of it. Oh, you're a postmenopausal woman, so drink 5 glasses of milk. No. Your risk will increase. Drink 1 glass of milk. That's enough. And take 1 more calcium extra if you want, if you need that. Okay? And therefore, to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, the higher total dairy consumption was associated with a lower prevalence of diabetes and metabolic syndrome in multiple studies that we have done. Almost all our studies, I have not shown you some of the others, but in all our studies, the same thing is coming again and again. Lower incidence of diabetes, hypertension, metabolic syndrome, lower risk of mortality. That is the most powerful data. And cardiovascular disease, particularly strokes, come down if you take dairy. The take-home message for all of you, if you want one take-home message, consumption of dairy, especially milk and yogurt, should be encouraged in India, as it can help improve nutrition and I believe it protects against type 2 diabetes and other cardiometabolic disorders. I've gone on social media and I've repeatedly kept saying this, but the voice is not loud enough. Oh, you have, it's an endocrine disruptor, it is anti-estrogen, it is pro-estrogen, all kinds of theories are there. Prove it. Prove it to me and I will stop using it. Okay? I was just telling Dr. Prajapati and the others, today when I came in the flight, they asked me, coffee or tea? I said milk. And I had milk. Honestly. This, I think, Dr. Prajapati already showed this, and I didn't ask him whether he was talking about it. That cow's milk is actually Amrita and it protects us from disease. It's already there in Rig Veda long ago. So thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Any questions, please? Yes, Doctor. Yes.
I think I'm loud enough.
Yeah, okay.
First of all, Dr. Mohan, it's such a pleasure to listen to you every time. I think it's an academic feast, and what I would say is that everything comes so clear, with a rationale, with a conviction, and authenticity, that it's just, I think it's a huge inspiration for all the youngsters who are sitting in this crowd, and they are motivated to do, I think they should get motivation to do this kind of elegant research and review and come out with the papers. We always look up to your papers because they give us a direction. Sir, I have one or two observations. For sure, I think whatever data we saw that, with the increase in the consumption of milk and curd, the risk to hypertension, to diabetes, to all the cardiometabolic risk factors is decreasing. But I think the point where we as key opinion leaders need to ponder and convey to people is, like what you said, how much is enough? Yeah. That's a very important point. So if my graph is showing that, from 0 to 1 to more than 2, I'm improving, that doesn't mean that I keep on going higher and I expect better results. So something which is good may not be very good if I consume in excess. That's point number one.
Anything consumed in excess is poison, as the old
correct.
saying goes.
So, but that's something which I think in all our conversations, even as nutritionists, we need to highlight that milk is good, curd is good, but how much is needed depends on where we are, in which age, which physiological state, and that needs to be defined. That's point number one. The second thing is, sir, the form in which yogurt is presented to Indian population today is very diverse. Yeah. What we are referring to is I convert the milk into curd. Yeah. But the same yogurt, if I convert it into a flavored yogurt, and I have variety of these products available on the shelf. Yeah. And just the fact to say that yogurt is good, people start picking up those kind of products and over-consuming. I think that is where, again, a check and a statement has to be made that, as much as possible, try and set your own curd. Yeah. If not, go for a plain yogurt which is available in the market. It may be, and it need not be, another thing is high fat. Yeah. So what we are looking at is 3 to 4% fat, which is like a normal level of fat in a cow's milk, which we expect. So now people have say that, the higher the fat percentage, the more beneficial the milk is. But that's again a myth. Yeah. I mean, buffalo's milk, 8% fat, is not going to give us that.
All this is based on cow's milk only.
Yeah, correct. This is all cow's milk. So that's another observation. And the last point is, that what actually is heating up this debate is that there are a lot of, observations that what the cows are being fed
you know, the hormones are being given. So the hormones are seeping into the milk, and people are now buying very, very expensive milk, the organic milk, which is supposed to be from those cows. So I think this is another area which we as consumers, we as professionals need to know more. We need to know the science behind that. That's one. And also the last point which I had in mind was, I think it just slipped off my mind. It'll come.
Come back.
So, yeah.
Taking up all your points, I think science is something that when you produce one evidence, you are answering one question, but then you're raising three other questions. For example, she's picked up how much is another question. Now, you raise a question about hormones. Very easily done. Why can't we pick across the country different types of milk from different cows fed different things? Privately, government, whatever we do, all types of milk, and study the hormone content in it. What is a great difficulty in doing that? Is it within a permissible limit? And we can say beyond this permissible limit is not permissible. We cannot have hormone level more. And then educate the farmers not to do this thing which will produce cancer. We keep on injecting. Same thing goes for chicken, same thing goes for everything, same thing goes for fish. There's mercury poisoning in fish. Okay, so we don't say don't eat fish, no. We say don't give mercury poisoning to the fish. There is a way to, fish is very good. But if you take a fish which already contains a lot of mercury and all that, then you're going to cause damage. That is there for everything, isn't it? The problem is again man-made. It is not the problem of the milk. It's not the problem of the fish. It is man-made. It's adulteration. It's our man's greed which is resulting in all this. You want chicken which is, looking fatter and fatter, and so you keep injecting hormones into that. The poor chicken, it's not good for chicken, it's not good for you also. Vultures falling dead because diclofenac it is eating. Okay? So I think all this has to be taken into account, and the final word is never told. We have to keep answering. Your question about this flavored thing is very well taken. You go to any 5-star hotel now, you have flavored yogurt, you have strawberry yogurt, you have mango yogurt, it's so sweet. It's absolutely sweet. You can make out it's full of calories. So when we talk about yogurt, it is plain yogurt. In fact, I mentioned it as plain yogurt. It's plain yogurt. We say nuts are good, okay, and my data shows that cashew nut is good. Now, when that paper got published, the first thing which the reporter asked me was it salted cashew or not? Because I showed blood pressure drops after eating cashew. It was raw cashew, just like the raw cashew is what you eaten. So I said, no, it is not salted, it is raw. Because I'm showing blood pressure drop. How can I say after giving salt, blood pressure drop? It's totally wrong, and it's not what I did. What I did, the cashew board got very upset. They said, but we sell only salted cashew, and you have now said that yours is unsalted. I said, I have to say what I did. I gave unsalted cashew. I can't tell them, no, I gave salt, still blood pressure came down. That's a total lie. You can't do that. I'm doing research to find out the truth. When I started my research on cashew, I thought LDL is going to go very high. It didn't go high. I was surprised. In fact, HDL went up and blood pressure dropped. That was the two finding. But it was raw cashew. So you must, for everything, you must know what you are giving, and that only applies to what was done. You cannot extrapolate that to many other things. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I have one question only, that in the curve where you showed that rice was having some big impact.
Yeah.
So added sugar was also very close to dairy. How should we read that?
Added sugar.
In the curve when I was looking at, except for rice.
No, the reason is that the added sugar, when you look at it in a population basis, it is very low. See, what do we take? We add 1 spoon of sugar in our coffee or tea, and we take 2 coffees in a day, 10 grams, okay, into 40 calories. When you're consuming 2,500 calories of rice, 40 calories from sugar makes no impact on it at all. It comes in when you drink a lot of these sweetened beverages, as they do in the West. Children become fat because they're drinking a lot of these sweetened beverages. So that is why in a population-based study, the consumption is so low. We are not saying it's protective, but it doesn't have an effect. It might have large enough effect on that. By the way, the rice story I didn't bring in here, and the next IDA meeting on December 3rd, when I come back to Mumbai, I'll present that. Longitudinal studies have kind of clinched it, that rice is one of from Pure itself, showing that it is strongly associated with thing. And when you give brown rice, the unpolished rice, it actually lowers the glycemic index and shows improvement. And then you can also improve the cereals by adding protein. If you add vegetable protein better. And if you add vegetable protein, it helps to blunt the GI. Because that's a different topic. I just wanted to stick to dairy today.